Hi, I'm Brett Godfrey, and this is Viewpoint. Last week, I talked to you about attaining your dreams. When I recorded the podcast, I hadn't named it yet. And if you remember, I said I didn't want to put a false set of assumptions into an otherwise simple process by talking about chasing dreams or following dreams, because it sounds like the dreams have a life of their own when in fact you are the creator of those dreams. This week, I'd like to continue on that path with you and talk to you about visualization on the road to success. Now, Olympic athletes use visualization. A lot of high-performance people use visualization for various things. Let's talk about what visualization is, and there's a good visualization and a bad visualization. Visualization is essentially nothing more than sitting back, closing your eyes, and creating an imaginary reality with such detail and such care that it starts to feel like it's real. We're all capable of this. We all daydream. Daydreaming can be a form of visualization. The difference between what I'm describing and ordinary daydreaming is that you're in much greater degree of control over what you're creating. It's sort of, in an imaginary world, you're sort of an architect building some new reality. And you have to see that reality. And you can even decide to smell that reality, hear that reality, taste that reality. But more than anything, know that it is real as you can make it. There's always going to be a part of your mind that says, hey, I'm making shit up. But at the end of the day, there's still a beneficial effect that survives that knowledge and makes it feel like you've already succeeded at something. Knowing that you've already succeeded at it up in here, y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Knowing that you've already succeeded at something up in here, and P.S., don't spend too much time in your head. This is controlled exercise. You're gonna be doing this for a purpose. Otherwise, it's better to be out in the real world doing real things and not wound up in your own horrid nest of viper-like idiosyncrasies. There's a giant difference, and that's control. You control what you visualize. So let me give you a concrete example. As we talked about last week, I had goals when I was a young man that I've more or less achieved now, at least to some degree. Now I'm just trying to increase the degree to which I've achieved those successes, because those fields are still very important to me. Law, writing, painting, martial arts, flying, although I don't fly much anymore due to my age. The concept is, how did I get there? Well, once I decided I wanted to be a martial artist or I wanted to be a trial lawyer, those were two of the early ones for me. And I'm talking ages, 14 to 15. I had this little exercise that nobody taught me. I just made it up. But I think it's a valid thing. I think today you'd find literature on it in terms of abstract visualization. So I'm going to first give you an idea of non-abstract visualization. Let's say I'm 15 years old and I want to be a trial lawyer. I close my eyes and I imagine myself as an adult standing in a courtroom. Maybe it's about 4:30 in the afternoon and it's been a long trial, and there's a certain ambiance in the courtroom and that heavy, powerful feel of this is where justice is done. Courtrooms have a tremendous ambiance to them most of the time. And some of it's architecture dependent, but most courtrooms have it. You visualize yourself in this beautiful courtroom with a jury that's right on the edge of deciding in your favor or against you. And now it's time for the closing argument. And you stand up and you clear your throat and you pour yourself a little glass of water. You take your time and you move to the podium. And by taking your time, you're exercising dominion over that courtroom. Not overly theatrically and not in an arrogant way, but you're not in a rush. In the immortal words of Jean-Luc Picard of Star Trek, there is no delay. It is the time I have chosen. So you get up and you give your argument. And you tell a story and you spin the words and you convey the truth of your case to the jury, and you beat your opponent doing it. You're so much more articulate. You're so much more fluid. You're so much more real, more genuine than the other guy, that the jury can't help but go your way. And then you sit down and you're exhausted, and the jury verdict comes out, and you win the trial. Hopefully you've been able to visualize a little bit of that just listening to my words. P.S. I left out one horrid fact. Between sitting down and getting a verdict, there's between 2 and 8 hours of total hell while you're waiting for the jury to complete its deliberations. And that they never show that in movies. But that is the hardest part about being a trial lawyer for me personally, is after I've said my last words and I'm waiting for a verdict, in some cases it's taken as long as 3 days. And for every minute of that, I'm biting my nails to the quick and I'm pacing, because I'm no longer able to control the outcome and it's out of my hands and I don't have an answer. So I'm stewing in this toxic brew of mystery and figuring out what I could have done better in the trial. So you just ignore that part. You just say, all right, when the jury's out, I'm going to work on another case, if you have the discipline to do that. I don't, but I wish I did. So you visualize. Now that was creative visualization. It was not abstract visualization. Now I want to talk to you about abstract visualization, because this is an amazing little tool that, at least in my life, proved itself. Nobody taught it to me. I made it up, but it seems to work pretty well for me. So I want to tell you more about when I was 15 years old. I wanted to be, I didn't want to just dabble in the martial arts. I wanted to be really serious about it. And I wanted to one day be a black belt in some martial art. In those days, I was thinking karate, Japanese martial art, because at that age, that's all I knew about. I didn't know about Jeet Kune Do or Wing Chun or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Kali or Eskrima or Penjak Salat or any of those other things. I just knew about karate and judo and boxing. So I was in a chair in my bedroom at home, and I sat back and I closed my eyes, and I mocked up an abstract scenario, a very symbolic scenario in my imagination. It was vivid. About 50 yards away from me, there was a target. And in my mind, that target was the goal. Let's say it's the goal of being in the martial arts for real, as a serious martial artist. That target is the goal. Something in my makeup is holding me back from achieving that goal. And I don't know what it is. So I thought I'd bypass it with symbolism. So in my mind, that target 50 yards out, looks like an archery target, is me being a serious martial artist, me being somebody who's on a path to a black belt someday. And I'm where I am. Because no matter where you want to go, you got to start from where you are. And if you don't know where you are, if you haven't realistically assessed where you are right now, you can't go from an imaginary place other than in your imagination. In real life, you can't make the journey. This is why we revert to imagination, because it'll smooth over some of the bumps, but you've got something holding you back. You don't know what it is. So in my mind, I would fire an arrow at that target. And it's interesting that sometimes the arrow would miss. It's my imagination. It's my fantasy. It's my invisible universe. How come I don't get to control everything that happens in it? This is weird. I shoot and I miss with the intention of hitting the bullseye. I don't hit it. Wow, what's that about? How did that happen? Well, my theory, and I'm sure a neuropsychologist or some such person would say, oh, it's really this or that, but it was, in my mind, a manifestation of my subconscious embodiment of doubt, that something was holding me back. I didn't know what it was, but it manifested itself in deflecting my arrow away from the bullseye. Maybe I was down and low to the left. Maybe I was high to the right, but I didn't hit the bullseye. And I believed at the time, and I still do, that was the subconscious doubt or whatever was operating below the surface of my mind that was preventing me from being dedicated and focused on that path. And so that made the arrow miss. So in my mind, I notched up another arrow and let fly. Maybe I got a little closer, maybe I didn't. But it was a matter of intention, and this is important. This is what makes this little tool work, is intention. You have to intend that arrow to go into that target. And if you don't have enough intensity in your intention, the arrow will miss. But if you have adjusted the focus of your mind, just like you can adjust the focus on a camera lens, and you have dialed in and you up the volume on the intention level, and then you notch another arrow and you will that arrow straight into that bullseye. And maybe this time you came oh so close, but you didn't quite hit it. Up the intention, up the focus. You are the master of your own universe. You notch another arrow, let fly, and intend that arrow. Whap! Right into the bullseye. Now, it so happens that my arrows are made of a special substance, and they have trailing cables on them. So they're like harpoons that whalers would use. So once that arrow is now hit that bullseye, it's got a cable coming out the back of it. And I use a mental winch. This is just abstract visualization, remember now. And I would tighten up that winch until that cable is tight as a piano string. Now I've got a mental connection that's symbolized in my mind by this ultra tight cable that goes from me, from my beingness, my center of physical activity, my body, my mind, my everything, to that bullseye of being a martial artist, or being a trial lawyer, or being a pilot. Once I let that arrow fly and it hits its target and I tighten that cable up, exercise is complete. That abstract visualization is done. Now, what is the byproduct of that? How would that really work for me? Well, I think the answer is because it allowed my subconscious to be an active participant in a mental attenuation and modulation process. Attention and modulation are just things that have to do with adjustments that you can make. The dictionary definition of attenuation is to blunt something or dull it down or disperse it. Modulation is controlling a characteristic about it. It might be the frequency of a wavelength or the amplitude of a wavelength, but FM is frequency modulation, AM is amplitude modulation, but it's changing something about that wavelength. And that wavelength in my mind was attenuated. It was dispersed. Arrow misses the target. But once I use this substitute for concrete visualization or non-abstract visualization, just to sort of up the intensity level, then the goal has been achieved. Now I'm ready for non-abstract visualization, where I might see myself signing up for, doing the research to find out where the best karate school is in my area, and then getting in the car and driving over there and talking to the sensei and saying, I'd like to sign up, or at least watching some classes to see if it looks like where I want to train. And that takes us, as we discussed last week, into now you're on the path to your dreams, to your goals. You've turned your dreams into goals, and you've started breaking the goals down into sub-steps that you're performing. You're now at the dojo talking to a sensei. And maybe the next thing you do is buy a gi and pay a monthly fee and sign up and start taking lessons, which is what I did. And if you lack the focus to even get in the car and drive to the dojo, maybe the harpoon trick will work for you, the abstract visualization. Now, let me point out, if you do abstract visualization, you don't have to use a bullseye target 50 yards away with imaginary arrows that have harpoon cables attached to them. That's just my thing. Maybe you'll mock it up in a different way. Maybe you'll symbolize it in a different way. When I was a young lawyer, I was highly stressed out because I was in cases where I was in charge, but I was up against much older, better trained, more experienced lawyers who had credibility. I didn't have any of those things. So I got so stressed out, I would use my abstract visualization, and in my mind, I would take a legal problem and I would mock it up as the most vicious prehistoric dog you ever saw. And I would put it into a plexiglass cage in a room that was my safe room that I had mocked up, which I learned to do from transcendental meditation. And on the walls of this room, there are magical spell books, like in a library, all the way around. And each of those contains magical incantations. And no matter how vicious that dog is, I've temporarily got him controlled in the plexiglass cage, but now I need to kill it forever. And I just need to find the magic incantation in the books that will do that. Now, I gradually transitioned that abstract visualization into more non-abstract by allowing those magical scrolls to turn into these things, law books. You can see we've got lots of them here. That's where the magical incantations are for a stressed out young lawyer, is knowing the law, finding the right spell, the right statute, the right rule, the right case, and applying it correctly. And you will kill that evil beast that you've got temporarily contained in the plexiglass cage. But a beautiful side effect of that particular form of visualization is I'm killing one animal at a time, one monstrous, prehistoric, vicious dog beast at a time. I get one in this plexiglass case. I've contained it off in a safe room, meaning it can't hurt me. I'm just doing my spells on it. So I'm breaking my chaos in my life down to one problem at a time. And I'm using knowledge of the law, my magic incantations, to slay that one beast. And when it's gone, I summon up the next one and the next one. And this created a psychological stance, or a position from which to have a mindset about the practice of law. And I couldn't believe how well this worked. It was an act of desperation to attempt this abstract visualization again, but it really helped me a lot. And of course, I got on top of my stress, at least for the time being. And this comes back, by the way. I have times today. I'm 62 years old, and I've got 100 jury trials under my belt, and I run the best law firm there is. But I still get stressed out. So every now and then, I need to go back to those first principles that came to me in my meditation sessions with abstract visualization. Let's say you're going to apply for a job somewhere, and maybe you've done the harpoon trick in your imagination that you get a job in this field. Now you're about to apply for a position in a real post, and you hesitate because you can't help but visualize that job interview going badly. Maybe you're shy, maybe you stutter, maybe you have aspects about your appearance and looks that make you self-conscious. So you can't help it. It's just automatic. It's involuntary. It comes out all of its own. You visualize yourself being the subject of mockery and derision and laughter in the back hallways after your interview's over. Hey, did you get a load of that idiot? They'll never fit in here. And you can't help but see things like that. That is creative visualization. It isn't controlled by you with your knowing awareness. You're controlling it, but you're doing it subconsciously because it comes up on its own. It's the uncontrolled part of the mind that runs around like a wild pony and dishes things up to you. So you have to take that image and realize that's the exact opposite of what you want. You can't banish it. but you can replace it with a more vivid, positive image. I'm going to say that again. You can't banish the negative image, but you can replace it with a more vivid, positive image if you just experiment with that a little bit. So rather than daydreaming, rather than worrying, rather than trying to figure out why you feel so shitty all the time in the post-pandemic world, maybe you could use idle time to do the real work of your life, where you're actually using your mind as a laboratory and you're creating new products in that laboratory. Visualization takes other forms. Let's say, for example, that you're a pole vaulter, and this is the way pole vaulters work, by the way. They visualize themselves doing every step of that approach perfectly, planning the pole perfectly, doing the various physical movements. I'm not a pole vaulter, so I'm not familiar with that. But they lay up over that bar a certain way, and they come down on the other side, and they don't hit the bar, and their pole doesn't hit the bar. And they visualize that over and over and over. And exercise physiologists and psychologists and neuropsychologists have found that repetition of success in the mind's eye starts to reinforce the neural pathways that we ignorantly call muscle memory. There's no such thing as muscle memory. There's neural pathways in the brain that are used to physical sensations through the sensorimotor nervous system to produce an output. But all of the memory is up in your brain. It's not in the muscle. And so if you can strengthen that set of memories and responses in the brain without moving a muscle, it works well. And that's why most top Olympic athletes will talk to you about the benefits of that type of visualization. Visualizing the perfect golf swing, visualizing maybe flying in a four-way formation in a competitive skydive, which I did a lot of. When I was on a team, we were a very successful team. It was called Colorado Gold, and we visualized our dives. We'd practice them on creepers, which are like little things on rollers on the hangar floor, but we would visualize our dives, and we'd visualize the dive all the way to jump altitude in the airplane. If you ever get on a skydiving ship, an airplane with skydivers in it, you'll see a lot of guys looking like they're having seizures because they're doing this. They've got their helmet propped up crazily on the top of their head, and they're doing this. What they're doing is they're visualizing their dive sequence. They're going to take these grips on this guy, those grips on that guy. They're going to turn a certain way, then they're going to do another turn, and they're just visualizing all of it all the way up in the airplane. And guys that don't do that never really perform that well in a competition skydive in four-way. And guys that do that tend to do better because it improves focus, it improves those neural pathways in the brain, and it makes the dive something that you've experienced even though you haven't done the dive yet. So these are various manifestations of visualization. But the key to this whole little chat that you and I have just had is control. Because your mind will summon up visualizations. You can summon up visualizations, or your subconscious can do it for you. The key is to control whether they're positive, productive, helpful, versus, I can see myself failing. I can see myself flubbing. I can see myself being humiliated because I can't do the interview well enough. Or I give the speech and everybody's staring at the carpet because they're so damn bored. Or whatever negative outcome you're afraid will happen. Because you're afraid it will happen, your attention is on it. And because your attention is on it, that's what your mind spins up for you. It serves it up to you on a platter. So change the nature of your attention. You have the power. Put that onto something positive. How do I succeed? Show me a version of success that's more real, more vivid, more believable than this negative image that just popped into my mind out of nowhere. You can't banish the negative vision, but you can replace it with something positive that's more vivid, more real, more compelling. I hope these ideas have been helpful to you. I would like to ask a personal favor of you. It's the first time I've done this on the show, but I probably will repeat it. We're building a pretty good following now. If you like the podcast, click like on your device, wherever you access the podcast from. Please consider posting a comment, positive or negative. I have a thick skin, and to me, criticism can be a very positive thing. If it's negative, I ignore it. If it's negative criticism that has a positive effect on me because it improves me, I worship it. I'm Brett Godfrey, and thank you for listening to this week's installment of Viewpoint.